Trisha thought she had finally reached the end of her messy, drawn-out saga with Marquez. The divorce papers were barely dry, and for a moment, she allowed herself to breathe, thinking that freedom had finally arrived. But in reality, the storm had only just begun. While some onlookers assumed that splitting from Marquez would bring her peace, the court had other plans that would turn her life upside down in ways she never could have anticipated. Custody battles, strict house rules, drug tests, and ticking deadlines created a pressure cooker that trapped not just her, but everyone around her. Most strikingly, Ken, her longtime partner, found himself caught in the crossfire, forced to either marry Trisha or move out, an ultimatum that turned what should have been a straightforward relationship into a legal minefield. The headline said it all. Trisha and Marquez were officially divorced. On the surface, it seemed like the kind of resolution many would celebrate. For Trisha, it should have marked a new beginning. A clean slate after years of public drama, arguments, and uncertainty. Yet, instead of relief, what arrived was a court order filled with restrictions that felt more like chains than freedom. Primary custody of their daughter was granted to Trisha, and on paper, that looked like a victory. But the fine print told a different story. Marquez's visitation rights were tightly controlled. No overnight stays unless he could prove he had a stable home, all bills in his name, and 3 consecutive clean drug tests. Not 1, not 2, but 3. And failure to meet even one of these requirements meant that overnight visits could be taken from him indefinitely. There was no leeway, no "we'll try again next week." Just a cold, hard line drawn in the sand. This drug testing requirement wasn't arbitrary. Courts rarely impose such stipulations without cause. Somebody had flagged serious concerns about Marquez's lifestyle, and the judge decided that these concerns warranted legal enforcement. This wasn't drama for the cameras. This was a safety issue, a red alert that underscored the potential risks involved in Marquez's interactions with his daughter. For Trisha, that meant victory in custody on paper, but it also came with the constant pressure of monitoring, reporting, and ensuring compliance, an emotional toll she hadn't anticipated. Meanwhile, Marquez's path to visitation was no longer a casual negotiation, but a high-stakes game of proving his reliability in every measurable way. While the spotlight was on Marquez, another shockwave hit Trisha's personal life, and this time it involved Ken. The court handed down a clause that Trisha could not live with a romantic partner unless they were legally married. No exceptions. No, we're just dating. No, he's helping out. No, it's complicated. For Ken, who had been a stable presence in her life, this was a jarring wake-up call. If he wanted to remain in the house, he had to be wearing a wedding ring. Otherwise, the court ordered him to vacate the property by 5:00 p.m. on August 25th. No extensions, no wiggle room. This presented a logistical nightmare. Ken, a truck driver, was frequently on the road for days at a time, sometimes weeks. Technically, he could argue that he was just visiting. But the distinction between visiting and living there is blurry at best. Leaving clothes behind, stocking the fridge, sleeping over frequently, these could all be interpreted as cohabiting under the law. And with Marquez waiting in the wings, ready to exploit any misstep, every day became a balancing act. Ken had always prided himself on being dependable, a steady presence for Trisha and her daughter. Yet suddenly, the very things that demonstrated his commitment were now potentially legal violations. The rules weren't just inconvenient, they were weaponized against him, and the pressure was relentless. Meanwhile, Ken was caught in an emotional and logistical limbo. After years of being Trisha's anchor, fixing up her house, paying bills, and acting as a father figure to her daughter, he suddenly found himself labeled an unauthorized occupant in the home he had helped stabilize. The stress wasn't just about where he would sleep, it was about the fragile nature of trust and commitment. If that wasn't enough, the court also ruled that Trisha's daughter could no longer appear on the reality show. Her name, her face, every trace of her involvement was prohibited. For a child who had been constantly in the public eye and caught in the middle of adult arguments, this was a moment of protection long overdue. For the producers of the show, however, this was a crisis. Without the child, much of the drama that drove ratings vanished. They would now have to scramble for new storylines, dig into other personal conflicts, or introduce entirely new faces to maintain engagement. From a parental standpoint, this was undoubtedly a win. From a production standpoint, it was a nightmare. The court had acted decisively, prioritizing the child's well-being over entertainment value, a rare move in the world of reality television. Meanwhile, Ken was caught in an emotional and logistical limbo. After years of being Trisha's anchor, fixing up her house, paying bills, and acting as a father figure to her daughter, he suddenly found himself labeled an unauthorized occupant in the home he had helped stabilize. The stress wasn't just about where he would sleep, it was about the fragile nature of trust and commitment. Trisha wasn't providing clear guidance, vacillating between hints of marriage and excuses for delay. Each day that passed without a decision intensified Ken's anxiety. By staying, he technically risked violating the court order. By leaving, he risked losing the only family structure he had grown into over the years. It was a no-win situation, and the uncertainty was crushing. Ken confided in his friend Will, who didn't sugarcoat the truth. "Bro," Will said, "if she wanted to marry you, y'all would've been hitched last year. This isn't about the court. This is about her not wanting to commit." The blunt honesty cut deep. Ken had always believed that love and loyalty would be enough. That time together and shared responsibility would naturally lead to commitment. But now, faced with a legal ultimatum, he had to confront the reality that love alone might not be sufficient to secure a future. The emotional weight of this realization was as heavy as the practical consequences of the court order itself. While Trisha and Ken navigated their uncertain limbo, Marquez was quietly making strategic moves. He secured a rental property, put utilities in his own name, and, according to sources close to him, had already passed 2 of the 3 required drug tests. All that stood between him and reinstated overnight visitation was a final clean test. If he succeeded, the custody dynamic would shift dramatically. For Trisha, the implications were clear. Every decision she made, every hesitation with Ken, every delay in commitment, had the potential to be leveraged against her in court. Marquez was no longer just an ex. He was a tactical player, carefully executing a plan that could redefine parental control and influence. Ken reached a point where waiting was no longer viable. He stopped asking Trisha about wedding plans and stopped pressing her for answers. He began observing her actions instead of listening to her words. What he saw was a woman unwilling, or perhaps unready, to make a definitive choice. And one Monday morning, before heading out on another long haul, he left a note on her kitchen counter. Simple, direct, and raw, it read, "You've had my heart, but I need to know you want it. I can't be your maybe anymore." Trisha found the note later that evening. She read it, sat in silence, and did nothing. No tears, no emotional outburst, no phone call. The silence itself spoke volumes, more than any argument ever could. That quiet, heavy pause encapsulated the state of their relationship, unstable, undefined, and teetering on the edge of collapse. By the end of that week, Marquez had passed his final drug test and filed a motion to modify custody. Once again, Trisha was on the defensive, and this time, Ken wasn't there to stand beside her. As the legal battles intensified, the production team behind the reality show scrambled to adapt. Rumors circulated that the producers were considering introducing a new family, possibly someone connected to Marquez, to maintain drama and audience engagement. For Trisha, this added another layer of stress. Not only was she managing custody and a fraught relationship with Ken, but she also had to navigate the optics of the show, public perception, and the constant scrutiny of a small-town audience. Huntsville wasn't large, and word traveled fast. Every move she made was analyzed, dissected, and speculated upon. In this environment, even minor missteps could have major repercussions. At the next reunion taping, Trisha showed up alone. Ken was absent, no ring on her finger, no explanation offered. She wore a perfectly curated outfit, rehearsed a practiced smile, and held her signature glass of wine. But the cracks were there, subtle but undeniable. Her hands shook ever so slightly, and a closer look revealed the missing sparkle on her left hand. Backstage, someone asked, "So, is it really over?" She exhaled slowly and replied, "I guess we'll see." In that moment, it was obvious to everyone. Ken wasn't coming back, and Trisha was standing alone, facing the consequences of her indecision. Meanwhile, Marquez appeared in court looking sharper and more composed than he had in years. His fight had evolved beyond casual visitation. He was now competing for relevance, redemption, and perhaps even revenge. In Huntsville, no one stays down for long. The key was to reload, and Marquez was playing that game to perfection. So where does that leave Trisha, Ken, and Marquez? Trisha is facing the weight of choices she's long delayed, balancing love, legality, and her daughter's stability. Ken has reached his breaking point, no longer willing to wait indefinitely, and Marquez is strategically positioning himself to regain influence over his child's life. The stakes are higher than ever, and the next move could change everything. What do you think will happen next? Will Trisha finally commit to Ken? Can Marcus successfully reclaim overnight visitation and shift the custody balance? Or are we witnessing the calm before the next storm in a saga that refuses to end? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if you want updates as this story unfolds. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a single twist in this drama-filled journey.